I didn't recognize the name at first. It wasn't until I saw the blurry photo of a man in a crowded hotel bar that it clicked. My phone vibrated with the notification, and I froze. The caption read, "Had an amazing time at the bar tonight. #funnytimes #vacation mode." It wasn't the hashtag that caught my eye, it was her. She was tagged in the selfie, her face barely visible in the background. But it was unmistakably her. The same blonde hair, the same sparkling eyes. The same smile I had seen 1,000 times. The one I thought was reserved for me. I stared at the image for what felt like hours, but it had only been seconds. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of it. My girlfriend, MIA, was supposed to be out of town. She'd left that morning for a weekend getaway with her family. She had told me she'd be in the mountains, disconnected from everything, including her phone. But now, there she was, in a hotel bar with a stranger, looking exactly as she did when we had dinner together the night before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a coincidence. I could feel the knot of confusion and dread tighten in my stomach. I should have ignored it. I should have put the phone down and walked away. But instead, I clicked on the profile, my fingers shaking. It wasn't public, but the image was visible because I was friends with the person who had posted it. He had only a few followers, probably some random tourist, but his face was oddly familiar. I'd seen it before somewhere. I tapped his name and scanned through his photos. There were a few pictures from various places, nothing too strange, but then I saw it, a photo of him and MIA. They were laughing together in front of the bar. A couple of drinks were in front of them. She was leaning in close to him, her face illuminated by the dim, golden light of the bar. I wanted to scream. To call her. To confront her. But I couldn't. I had to make sense of this first. I needed the truth. I stared at the screen, watching the small dots as the image loaded. Her face was still smiling, unaware that I was seeing this. Unaware that I was piecing together a puzzle that didn't make sense. I never expected to feel like this. Never thought I'd find myself staring at a photo, wondering what I was supposed to do with it. There was a slight sense of disbelief. She had told me everything. She had shared every detail about her trip, about her family, the scenery, the fresh air. She had been so excited about the trip that she had hardly mentioned anything else. And now, here I was, standing in my own home, betrayed by something as simple as a selfie. My stomach twisted as the realization hit me like a freight train. MA had lied to me. The lies were small at first, subtle, but now I could see them for what they were. I set the phone down. The feeling of betrayal lingered in the air like smoke. I thought about calling her. But what would I say? What could I possibly say to make sense of this? If she had lied about something so trivial, so easily discoverable, what else had she been lying about? I reached for my jacket and slid my arms into the sleeves, all while my mind raced with 1,000 questions. What had she told me that wasn't true? Where else had she been? Who was this guy? Why didn't she tell me about him? I needed answers. And the only way to get them was to confront her. I didn't know how this would play out. I didn't know if she'd lie her way out of this or if the truth would come pouring out. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't going to be easy. The person I thought I knew, the person I trusted more than anyone else, was now a stranger in my eyes. I stood by the door, taking a deep breath as I prepared myself for whatever confrontation was coming. Was it the right thing to do? Was it better to let it go and let her explain when she got back? Or should I confront her now? The screen of my phone blinked again, pulling me back into the moment. A new notification appeared. MIA had liked the photo. That simple action, her liking the photo, felt like the final dagger. The thing that confirmed that something wasn't right. I exhaled slowly and walked out the door, leaving the silence behind me. The drive felt like it took forever, each second dragging on longer than the last. The anticipation built inside me, but with it, so did a sense of dread. When I pulled into her apartment complex, I parked the car and just sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Was this a mistake? Was I overreacting? Should I just wait for her to come home and hear her side of the story first? But I knew. I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't let this slide, not without getting the answers I deserved. I got out of the car and headed up the stairs to her apartment. The hallway was eerily quiet, and as I approached her door, I could feel my pulse quicken. I didn't know what I would say when she opened the door. All I knew was that I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I knocked once. Twice. It felt like a lifetime before she opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. Her hair was slightly messier than usual, and she wore an oversized sweater. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, my mind racing. She was standing there, right in front of me, and I could see it now. There was something off about her. "You were supposed to be in the mountains with your family, am I said, my voice tight. "But I saw a photo of you. With someone else. A guy, at a hotel bar." Her expression faltered. For the briefest of seconds, I saw panic flash across her face. But she quickly masked it with a smile. "What are you talking about?" she said softly, almost dismissively. "The guy in the photo, am I said, taking a step forward. "The guy you were sitting with. He posted it. You were tagged. You didn't tell me about him. You didn't tell me about your plans." I could see her thinking, her mind working in overdrive, trying to come up with an excuse. But it wasn't going to work this time. The lies weren't going to work anymore. She looked down for a moment, her face pale. When she looked back up at me, there was no more hiding. No more pretending. "I didn't think it mattered," she admitted, her voice quiet. "It wasn't anything serious." "But you lied to me," I said, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle over me. "Why?" She shook her head slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did." And just like that, the truth hung in the air between us. The questions I had been carrying for hours had been answered. But they only left more in their wake. The silence stretched on, thick with unspoken words. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. I didn't know what else there was to say. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the doorway. The world felt different now. Heavier. And though I didn't know what came next, I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel the cold air pressing against me as I walked down the hall, my mind replaying Mia's words over and over. It wasn't anything serious. The simplicity of that phrase had sent a sharp pain through me, a blunt reminder of how easily she'd tried to brush away the weight of her actions. I couldn't believe it. I had been standing there in front of her, listening to her half-truths, watching her desperately try to spin a web of excuses. Nothing had felt real anymore. I stepped out of the apartment building and into the parking lot, barely noticing the hum of passing cars or the glow of streetlights above me. My hands were shaking as I fumbled to unlock my phone, desperately scrolling through the photo that had set all of this in motion. It was still there. Still sitting on my screen like a cruel reminder of everything I had ignored until now. She had liked the post. That simple gesture, her small action in a sea of tiny betrayals, felt like a final confirmation. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't an innocent night out. I felt like I was losing control of everything. Every plan, every hope for the future, suddenly seemed like a lie. I got in my car, slamming the door behind me, and stared at the dark road ahead. There was no destination. Just an endless road, stretching out before me like my thoughts, disjointed, uncertain, and impossible to navigate. What had I been doing for the past year? What was I in this relationship for? Was it just to be the fool who believed the lies? I didn't know how long I drove. My foot was heavy on the pedal, but I wasn't speeding. I wasn't trying to go anywhere. The motion was just to distract me from the pain of the betrayal, the pain of the weight of the truth settling into my chest. The air in the car felt thick, like I was suffocating. When I finally stopped, I didn't know where I was. Some corner of the city, far from the apartment complex, far from MIA. I turned the engine off, the sudden silence around me almost deafening. The photo of MIA in the bar, that smile so casual, so carefree, kept replaying in my mind. I should have gone home. I should have confronted her, demanded every detail, every truth she had been hiding. But I couldn't do it. I needed space. I needed to breathe, to think. This wasn't just about what MIA had done. It was about the lies. It was about the trust that had been shattered in the blink of an eye. I sat there for a long time, the city sounds muffling in the distance, my phone still open in my hand. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. I wasn't even sure I was ready to talk to MIA. But I knew I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep driving aimlessly, consumed by the chaos in my mind. My phone buzzed again, the vibration breaking the stillness. MIA had sent me a message. "We need to talk. Can we meet?" She wanted to meet. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to just turn my phone off, forget everything, and pretend it wasn't happening. But I couldn't. She was right, there was no escaping it now. I typed a quick response: "I'm at the corner of 3rd and Willow. We can talk now." As soon as I hit send, I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't prepared for the conversation that was coming. But it was inevitable, wasn't it? There was no way around it. I needed answers. And I needed them now. Minutes later, I saw her walking toward me. MIA. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet street, and I watched her approach with an uneasy sense of dread. She looked the same as always, her hair pulled back into a ponytail, wearing a jacket that looked a little too thin for the chilly evening air. But her eyes, those eyes, were different. They weren't the same. They were tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. Like the weight of her own secrets was starting to crush her. When she reached the car, she paused, glancing at the passenger seat where I had been sitting. There was no warmth in her smile. No warmth in her eyes. There was nothing but distance. And I hated it. I unlocked the door for her, and she slid into the seat beside me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. "I'm sorry," Emma said, breaking the stillness. "I never meant for you to find out this way." I stared straight ahead, my grip on the steering wheel tight. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just be honest with me from the start?" Her voice faltered. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to destroy what we had." I scoffed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You're already doing that, am I? Lying to me, hiding things from me, this is already destroying everything." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far." I turned to face her then, the frustration boiling inside me. "Then why didn't you stop? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why did you go to a hotel bar with someone else? Why did you lie about your plans?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hands. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never planned for any of this. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you." I shook my head slowly. "You lost me the moment you thought I wouldn't find out. You lost me the moment you decided to hide the truth." She sniffed, wiping at her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen. It was just a stupid mistake, and I don't know why I did it. I was just, I don't know. Lost, I guess." "Lost?" I repeated, incredulous. "How does going to a bar with someone else solve being lost, MIA? How does lying to me, hiding everything, fix anything?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I thought maybe it would make me feel better. But it didn't. I hate myself for what I did." The tears started falling now, and MIA looked away from me. Her shoulders were shaking, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. She had crossed a line that I wasn't sure could be uncrossed. Her actions had created a space between us, a chasm that felt impossible to bridge. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Emma," I said, my voice rough. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Her eyes met mine, pleading. "Please, don't say that. I love you. I'm sorry for everything." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. It wasn't just about MIA. It was about me, too. About my own ability to forgive, my own willingness to move forward. But how could I move forward when the foundation of everything we had built together had crumbled beneath me? "I need time," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure this out. I can't do this right now." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. With that, I started the car and drove away, the weight of my decision heavy in the air. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if this was the end of us or just the beginning of a new chapter. But one thing was certain, I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. Not now. Not after what I had seen. Not after the truth had come to light. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. Mia's message had left a mark on me. "I love you. I'm sorry for everything." I couldn't shake it, couldn't make sense of the words, or the way she said them. It sounded so genuine, so desperate, but how could I believe her? How could I trust anything she said after everything she had done? I tried to focus on my routine, to bury the chaos inside my head. The lectures at university, the late-night study sessions for the exams I was supposed to be preparing for, it all felt like a blur. My friends, who had been there for me through everything, kept checking in, their faces full of concern when I tried to brush them off. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. I wasn't ready to share the mess of emotions that were twisting inside me. So, I kept it all inside, drowning myself in work, in distractions. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mia's face, the way her eyes had begged for forgiveness, the way her voice had cracked with emotion. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that there was still something worth saving. But how could I when all I felt was betrayal? Then came the text. It was late in the evening, and I had just returned from a late study session when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. Can we meet? I need to talk. I didn't know what to make of it. My first instinct was to ignore it, to keep running, to keep avoiding the confrontation. But I knew deep down I couldn't. This wasn't just about the lies anymore. It was about everything we had built, everything I had believed in. And if we were going to move forward, we needed to talk. So, I agreed to meet her at the same spot, by the old coffee shop near the river, where we used to go when things were easier, when everything felt like it had a future. I hated that place now. It was a reminder of the past, of what we had, and of what I was losing. But I needed closure. I needed to hear her side of the story, even if it hurt. When I arrived, Emma was already there, standing near the edge of the water, her coat wrapped tightly around her. She looked the same as always, beautiful, but somehow distant, like a version of her I barely recognized anymore. When she saw me, her face softened, but there was no smile, no warmth. Just an unreadable expression. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't know what to say after everything. My mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed with every beat. She nodded, her hands stuffed into her pockets. "I know this is probably the last thing you want to do, but I need to explain myself. I need you to understand why I did what I did." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. "I don't know if I can understand, Emma. I don't know if I even want to." She looked down at the ground, like she was trying to find the right words, or maybe just the strength to speak them. "I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that." But I was scared. I felt like I was losing myself, like everything was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know who to talk to, so I made a stupid decision. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, the frustration that had been building for days, but I tried to keep it in check. "So, you thought going to a hotel bar with some guy was going to help? You thought lying to me, hiding it from me, was the way to fix everything?" Emma flinched at the harshness in my voice, but she didn't look away. She stood there, shoulders slumped, like she was waiting for me to hit her with all the words I was holding back. "I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how it happened. It was a mistake, Matthew. Just a stupid mistake. I was lost. And I didn't want to lose you too, so I tried to bury it, to make it go away. But now I see, it just made everything worse." I shook my head, stepping back. "It's not just one mistake, Emma. It's a whole series of them. You've been lying to me for weeks. For months. And I've been blind, thinking everything was fine, thinking we were okay. But this isn't something I can just forget." Mia's eyes were wide now, the tears threatening to spill over, but she held them back. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even expect you to want to be with me anymore. But I love you, Matthew. And I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I took a step away from her, my mind racing. Do I love her? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to scream that I couldn't live without her, that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after the lies, the betrayal. Maybe this is where we're supposed to end," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. "Maybe we've both changed, Emma. Maybe we're not the same people we were when we started. And maybe that's okay." She shook her head, a desperate look in her eyes. "No, Matthew. Please, don't say that. We can fix this. We can work through it together. I don't want to lose you." "I don't know if I can do that anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking despite myself. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can believe in us like I used to." The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a future I wasn't sure I wanted to jump into anymore. And Emma, standing there in front of me, her face pale with fear, seemed like someone I barely knew. I guess this is it," I said, the finality of it hitting me all at once. Mia's lips trembled as she stepped forward, but I didn't move to meet her. "I'm so sorry, Matthew. For everything. I never wanted to hurt you. I was afraid." "I know," I said quietly. "But fear doesn't give you the right to hurt someone else." With that, I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew it was away from her. Away from the lies. Away from the girl I thought I loved. I wasn't sure if I'd ever find my way back to her. And I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But for the first time in days, I felt a small sense of relief. It wasn't about closure. It wasn't about the answers she'd given me. It was about knowing that, for the first time, I was finally being honest with myself. And maybe that was the first step toward finding peace again. It had been a few weeks since I saw MIA by the river. Those days felt like they stretched out endlessly, like I was living in a world that no longer made sense. Everything had changed, and yet nothing felt real. I was going through the motions, going to class, meeting up with friends, pretending like I had my life together, but inside, I felt like I was drowning. There were moments when I thought about texting MIA, asking her how she was, wondering if she missed me. But every time I picked up my phone, the weight of the past held me back. It wasn't just the lies. It wasn't just her betrayal. It was everything. The doubts, the uncertainty, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we had never truly been what we thought we were. I spent my days buried in work, my nights filled with restless thoughts. My friends had noticed the change in me, the way I was quieter, more withdrawn. They'd ask if I was okay, and I'd tell them I was fine, just busy with school. They could see through my mask, though. They could see the cracks in my armor. One afternoon, after a long lecture, I found myself walking aimlessly through campus, my mind as scattered as ever. I didn't want to go home just yet. I didn't want to face the emptiness of my apartment, the place where everything used to feel comfortable and safe. But even though I tried to keep moving, the thoughts of MIA kept following me, lurking in the back of my mind. I pulled out my phone again, staring at the screen. No new messages. No missed calls. Just an empty inbox, except for her final text, the one I hadn't responded to. I hadn't even been able to delete it. It felt like an anchor, pulling me back to that moment, to everything I had tried to forget. It was then that I saw it. There, buried under my notifications, was a post. MIA. A photo of her at a cafe, a coffee cup in her hand, her smile, genuine this time, shining in the soft light. Her caption was simple, but it hit me like a punch to the gut, taking it one day at a time. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. It was a small thing, a photo, a few words. But it was everything. It was the way she was moving on. The way she had let go. And the realization crashed over me. I wasn't the one holding on anymore. She was. I set my phone down on the bench, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't just her life that had moved forward. It was mine, too. I had spent so long staring at the wreckage of what we had, holding on to the pain and the anger, that I hadn't noticed how much I had changed. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first met MI. And I wasn't going to pretend to be. The truth was, I had been hiding from myself, too. Hiding from the fact that the person I had fallen in love with wasn't the person I had thought she was. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the person I thought I was, either. I had been holding on to the idea of us for so long, clinging to the image of what I wanted our future to be, that I couldn't see how much it was all falling apart. I needed to face that. I needed to let go. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about finding closure. It was about moving on. For me. I didn't need to hold on to the past any longer. I didn't need to chase the person I had lost. So, I deleted the photo. The one from the hotel bar. The one that had started it all. I deleted it from my phone, from my mind, from my heart. It wasn't easy. There were still days when I wondered if I had made the right choice, days when I missed her laugh, her smile, the way we used to be. But those days were getting fewer. And I was learning to embrace the quiet, to appreciate the space she had left behind. I started focusing more on my studies, on the things that mattered to me. My friends, who had been a constant support, were there for me when I needed them. And slowly, I started to rediscover the parts of myself I had lost. The version of me before all of this. The one who didn't rely on someone else to define his worth. Weeks went by, and I found myself laughing again, feeling the sunlight on my face without the weight of the past pressing down on me. I started to look forward to things that weren't related to MIA or the wreckage of our relationship. I was finding joy in the little moments again. And then, one evening, when I least expected it, I ran into her. I had been walking to my car after class, my mind still half on the assignment I needed to finish, when I heard her voice. Matthew. I turned, surprised to see MIA standing there, her hands tucked in her jacket, looking just as unsure as I felt. She hesitated before taking a step toward me. I wasn't expecting to see you here, she said quietly, her eyes searching my face for any sign of recognition, of warmth. I felt a small pang in my chest, but it was fleeting. Yeah, I'm just heading home. There was an awkward silence between us, the kind that came from too many unspoken things. How have you been? She asked, her voice soft. I swallowed, not sure what to say. I've been good. Better, actually. Her eyes dropped to the ground for a moment, and I could see the sadness in her expression. I'm glad. I'm sorry, you know. For everything. I nodded, my throat tight. I know you are, Emma. Another pause. I've been thinking about everything, too. I don't know what else to say. I don't expect us to go back to how things were, but I hope you find peace, Matthew. I really do. I nodded again, not trusting myself to speak. I could see that she had changed. That she was moving forward, just like I was. I hope you find it, too, I said, my voice steady now. Good luck with everything. She smiled softly, a bittersweet kind of smile. Take care, Matthew. With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of students. I watched her go, but this time, there was no ache, no longing to run after her. Just a quiet acceptance. It was done. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long finally lifted. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was free. I didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I stood there for a moment, the words MIA had left hanging in the air like an echo. There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only the kind of raw, open honesty that left me feeling both relieved and empty. I had thought seeing her again would feel like reopening an old wound, but it wasn't like that at all. Instead, it was more like the final, inevitable release of something that had been strangling the life out of me for months. I should have felt more, but I didn't. What I felt was nothing. And maybe that was a blessing. I started walking to my car, still processing what had just happened. She was moving on. So was I. There was no grand declaration of feelings, no sudden realization that we were meant to be together. There was just a shared understanding that we had both tried and failed, and now we were two people walking separate paths. The rain began to fall as I reached my car, a soft drizzle that matched my mood. It wasn't heavy enough to soak through my clothes, but it was enough to create that feeling of isolation, the kind you get when you're alone in a crowd. I sat in my car for a while, watching the droplets race each other down the windshield. The world outside was a blur, just like my thoughts. Everything felt far away, yet intimately close. I didn't know where I was headed anymore, or what was next. There was no grand plan for my life, no clear direction. But somehow, that felt okay. I had spent so much time chasing after things, chasing after MIA, chasing after the idea of a perfect life, of love and stability, and now, for the first time in a long while, I realized that maybe I was allowed to just be. I drove aimlessly for a while, the headlights cutting through the rain as I made my way through the city. I wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. In fact, the thought of going home didn't seem as appealing as it usually did. But I found myself heading there, anyway. The apartment I had once shared with MIA now felt foreign, like a place I had outgrown, a space that had once held so many promises but was now just empty. When I got there, I wasn't sure what to do next. I could unpack the boxes I had left in the corner, or I could clean the place up, erase the remnants of the past. But instead, I just sat on the couch for a while, staring out the window at the city skyline. I hadn't really given myself the time to process everything that had happened. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence, and I startled as if I had been asleep. My heart raced a little. For a split second, I wondered if it was MIA again, though I knew it couldn't be. I stood up slowly, walking over to the door and peering through the peephole. It was Kate. I hadn't heard from Kate in days. She had been my friend long before MIA had come into my life, someone who had always been there to talk to when I needed an escape. And lately, she'd been the only person who understood what I was going through. I opened the door, and she stepped in without waiting for an invitation. There was something comforting about her presence. She had that way of being both grounded and light-hearted at the same time. You look like hell, Kate said, her eyes scanning the dimly lit apartment. What's going on? I thought you'd be out of your funk by now. I managed a small smile, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. You know me too well. She closed the door behind her, making herself comfortable on the couch. I don't think I do. You've been different lately. I get it, MIA, everything, but you've got to snap out of this, man. You're stronger than this. I let out a long breath, sitting beside her. I don't know if I feel stronger. I just feel numb. That's okay, too, she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. You're not supposed to feel fine right away. It's okay to take time. But you can't live in this space forever. I know. The words felt heavy on my tongue, like they were weighted by all the unspoken things I hadn't let myself admit. I just don't know how to move forward. Everything feels like it's been reset, and I don't know what to do next. I feel like I'm treading water, just trying to stay afloat. Is that so bad? Kate asked, her tone gentle but curious. Sometimes, we need to tread water for a while. We need that space to breathe and figure things out. And, I don't think you have to have everything figured out right now. But you do need to stop looking backwards. I know it's hard. Believe me, I do. But you've got to start looking ahead. I glanced at her, a little taken aback. And what if I don't know where I'm going? Then you figure it out as you go, she replied simply. But you can't keep holding on to what's behind you. MIA, the relationship, everything. You've already done the hardest part, letting go. I felt the weight of her words. They were like a small spark of light in the middle of my darkness. Maybe Kate was right. Maybe this wasn't about rushing forward, about finding a quick fix. Maybe it was about letting the pain settle, letting myself heal in my own time. I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to keep moving, even if it was slowly. I'm not sure I know how to let go, I said softly. Kate met my gaze, her eyes kind and steady. I think you already have. I leaned back, taking in her words, letting them sink into me. It was hard to believe it, but in that moment, I realized that maybe she was right. Maybe I had already started the process of moving on, not because I was ready, but because it was the only thing left for me to do. Kate stayed with me for a while, talking about everything and nothing, just being there in a way that made the world feel a little more bearable. She didn't try to fix me, didn't try to offer me some magical solution. She just sat with me, and that was enough. When she left, I felt a little lighter. Maybe I didn't have it all figured out, but that was okay. I had made it through the worst of it, and now I could start figuring out the rest. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time, it didn't feel as daunting. As I turned off the lights and crawled into bed that night, I didn't have all the answers. But I had hope. And maybe that was the most important thing of all.